Welcome everyone to another Dhamma session. In our last episode, we learned the first two factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, right view and right intention. We could see that together they comprise the quality of wisdom, Paññā, that leads our training and development of the rest of the path factors. One important attribute of right view and right intention is that they oppose and counteract the three unwholesome roots from which all unwholesome states of body, speech, and mind manifest within us. If we remember, we mentioned that there are 6 roots in total. 3 are unwholesome, greed, hatred, and delusion, and 3 that are wholesome, non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. And how do right view and right intention counteract the 3 unwholesome roots? Well, it's important to know that of the 3 unwholesome roots, delusion or ignorance is the most dreadful of all, because from delusion, greed and hatred come to be. However, and for our benefit, right view, as we saw in our last talk, is the quality and faculty of wisdom, and it has the power and ability to dispel the darkness of ignorance, allowing one to see the true nature of suffering present in all conditioned things. While delusion is characterized by the lack of understanding and comprehension, right view brings correct understanding, leading to true comprehension. This is how right view counteracts the unwholesome root of delusion. Then we have the factor of right intention that is able to oppose greed and hatred. The intention of renunciation counteracts greed, and the intentions of goodwill and harmlessness or non-cruelty counteract hatred. We can see how the practice of the path sets us on the right track right from the start to work against the unwholesome roots, leading us towards the wholesome ones for our true benefit and purification. The next 3 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path that we will discuss today are the 3 factors of moral discipline, virtue, in Pali, Sīla. They are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These 3 path factors comprise the first of 3 groups or divisions of the path. The second group is called Samādhi, concentration, and the third is called Paññā, wisdom. There is a passage in the Dhammapada that reflects very well the importance of our moral training. The Buddha said to avoid all evil, to cultivate the good, and to cleanse one's mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. This verse helps us understand the steps to take on this path, in particular regarding the 3 factors of moral discipline. The first step to take is the restraint or avoidance of all evil. For this, we need to identify the unwholesome present in us, recognize it, and be brave to face it. The second step is to replace it with its opposite, with what is good and wholesome. For this, we need to cultivate within us what is good, what is beneficial for ourselves, others, and both. And finally, to purify the heart and mind. This implies cleansing any trace and residue of impurities within ourselves. The factors of moral training support the process of inner purification. They are crucial in our progress on our practice. The term Sīla is the principle of right conduct. It calibrates the purity and precision of our moral compass. The practice of Sīla, in essence, is the abstinence from unwholesome bodily and verbal actions and committing oneself to the wholesome ones. It purifies our qualities of virtue, reshaping our traits of character and conduct. The observance of Sīla harmonizes our inner states of mind, as well as the atmosphere around us. It also sets a condition to plant wholesome seeds that will bring wholesome fruits in the future. The Buddha gave great importance to the practice and observance of Sīla. He encouraged us to be careful and attentive in spotting the danger that exists in the slightest fault in our actions of body, speech, and mind, even the most subtle ones. As we progress on the path, we become more sensitive and also intolerant to any unwholesomeness that arises within ourselves. Things that before we thought to be relevant, we begin to realize that they are harmful and not conducive to our well-being and purification process. If we want to embark on the Dhamma practice, we should first establish ourselves in purified moral conduct. The Buddha said that we can begin our journey on Dhamma by establishing ourselves in virtue, right conduct, developing wholesome states, and establishing ourselves in right view. And from here, we should develop in the four foundations of mindfulness, the practice that develops insight, leading to the cessation of suffering. In a discourse, the Buddha shared the 10 courses of unwholesome actions. We briefly reviewed them in our last talk. He said that these should be avoided in order to support our purification process. He said, impurity by body is threefold: taking life, killing living beings, taking what is not given, stealing, and engaging in sexual misconduct. Impurity by speech is fourfold: false speech, lying, slanderous or divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. And impurity by mind is threefold: having a mind of covetousness, greed, having a mind of ill will, hatred, and holding wrong views. To develop the path factor of right speech, Sammā Vācā, we need to abstain from false speech, from slanderous speech, from harsh speech, and from idle chatter. And how do we abstain from false speech? In this case, the Buddha said that one abandoning false speech abstains from false speech. One speaks the truth, holds to the truth, is firm, reliable, not a deceiver of people. When it comes to speaking lies, we also need to review the intentions behind the action of speech. If our intentions are rooted in greed, for example, then the motivation to speak a lie has the purpose to gain something, using lies to take advantage of a certain situation or condition. With hatred as the root, the intention to lie is aimed at hurting others. And when delusion or ignorance is present, then the intention to lie comes from a clouded, confused, and deluded mind. Perhaps to better understand the dangers and drawbacks of false speech, we can review a story of the Buddha with his son. At that time, the Buddha went to visit his son Rāhula, who was just 7 years old and had recently ordained as a novice. As the Buddha was coming to see him, Rāhula prepared a seat and set out water for washing his feet. Then the Buddha sat down and washed his feet and left a little water in the water vessel and asked him, "Rāhula, do you see this little water left in the water vessel?" He replied, "Yes, Venerable Sir." "Even so little, Rāhula, is the recluseship of those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. Here, recluseship means monkhood, the spiritual life of a recluse that lives under the principles of the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha then threw away the little water that was left and asked, "Rāhula, do you see that little water that was thrown away? In the same way, those who are not ashamed to tell the deliberate lie have thrown away their recluseship." Then the Buddha turned the water vessel upside down and asked Rāhula again, "Do you see this water vessel turned upside down? This is how those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie have turned their recluseship upside down." Then the Buddha turned the water vessel right way up and asked again, "Do you see, Rāhula, this hollow, empty water vessel?" "Yes, sir," he answered. Even so hollow and empty, Rāhula, is the recluseship of those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. "Rāhula," the Buddha said, "when one is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, there is no evil, I say, that one will not do. Therefore, Rāhula, you should train thus. I will not utter a falsehood, even as a joke." If we reflect carefully, we can appreciate the benefits that truthful speech brings to us, and also recognize the important role it plays in our day-to-day relationships with others. If we consider that wisdom is the realization of what is true and real, a wise person will always incline to speak what is true and real. From the Buddhist perspective, truth, satcha, is not merely an accurate or correct statement. Truth is the nature of things as they actually are. To realize truth, we must bring our whole being into harmony with reality. We must learn to see things clearly and honestly without distortion. This inner alignment with reality naturally extends to the way we communicate with others. If we are committed to truth, we show that commitment by speaking truthfully. We respect things as they are, and we represent them honestly in our words. When our speech is truthful, we develop inner harmony, and as a consequence of this, we bring harmony to all those around us. In this way, truthful speech becomes more than a moral practice. It becomes a foundation for wisdom. By speaking truthfully, we cultivate the integrity and clarity that allow wisdom to arise and deepen our understanding of the true nature of phenomena. The second aspect of right speech is to abstain from slanderous or divisive speech. The Buddha said, having abandoned divisive speech, he abstains from divisive speech. Having heard something here, he does not repeat it elsewhere in order to divide those people from these. Or having heard something elsewhere, he does not repeat it to these people in order to divide them from those. Thus, he is one who reunites those who are divided, a promoter of unity, who enjoys concord, rejoices in concord, delights in concord, a speaker of words that promote concord. In this statement, the Buddha highlights the importance of refraining from engaging in divisive speech and in any statements that are intended to incite division and enmity among individuals. We can observe the seeds that give rise to such forms of speech, They can be mental or emotional states of being that are related to hatred, aversion, resentment, or any resistance or reaction towards a person, situations, or circumstances that one comes across. They could also be related to some inner hurt or trauma that has not been healed or treated. In any case, independently from the root causes that give rise to divisive speech, we should make an effort to refrain from it. The Buddha warned us of the unwholesome karma that is generated when speaking in such a way. It gives rise to unwholesome states and leads to more suffering. As he mentioned, we should speak words that bring people together, that unite and promote harmony and friendship among them. This type of speech comes from a heart and state of being rooted in kindness, empathy, and compassion. Wholesome qualities are present in the heart. They bring happiness and joy in seeing others united and in harmony. The third aspect of right speech is to abstain from harsh speech. The Buddha said, having abandoned harsh speech, he abstains from it. He speaks such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear, and lovable, as go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. Harsh speech is any type of speech that is bitter, spiky, angry, that cuts into the hearts of people and causes them a lot of pain, shame, and discomfort. We can find harsh speech most commonly in insults. When someone is insulting others, the aim is to hurt, offend, and break others. The words are like bullets aimed at the target to be hit over and over. Abusive speech is another form of harsh speech. This type of speech aims at putting down the person, confronting, admonishing, and reproving them of their qualities or integrity. The words aim to subdue the person. We can also find harsh speech in mockery or sarcasm. Although the words can be carefully crafted to appear or sound differently, the intention behind the message is still to harm, reprove, or ridicule the person. Any form of harsh speech comes from hatred and aversion. Anyone who speaks harshly is driven by them. There is a lot of suffering within, and it is very difficult to see. Speaking harshly is also an indicator of the person's struggles for being under the influence of hatred and aversion. This is not to justify this unwholesome act of speech, but it can give us a perspective to understand the situation better. At some point, we all have been under the influence of hatred and aversion and have also engaged in harsh speech. And when someone speaks harshly to us, the tendency is to generally defend ourselves by replying in the same way. But this proves that there is no benefit in such an attitude and action. When we practice Dhamma, we are encouraged to deal with suffering, to face it. And one way to do this is by being patient with it. When someone speaks harshly to us, we feel the pain and discomfort. We are being trashed and tortured by such hurtful words. That alone is the experience of the first noble truth. At that very moment is when we can bring patience and endurance to this experience. In this way, we give ourselves the space and the opportunity to see a bit clearer what lies beyond that pain and hurt. When we are blamed, insulted, or criticized, we can make an effort to practice patience and endurance and confront the truth of suffering with restraint. This is how we can prevent the impulses or reactions to retaliate, to fight back, and perhaps give ourselves a chance to develop empathy and compassion for ourselves and for those that are hurting us. In this way, we can gain insight by bringing a different angle and a deeper perspective to this situation. This training process naturally leads to our purification of speech, which in turn will lead us to the cessation of suffering. The final aspect of right speech is to refrain from engaging in idle chatter. The Buddha said, having abandoned idle chatter, he abstains from it. He speaks at a proper time, speaks truth, speaks what is beneficial, speaks on the Dhamma and the discipline. At a proper time, he speaks such words as are worth recording, reasonable, succinct, and beneficial. This aspect of right speech implies refraining from frivolous, meaningless talk that wastes time and energy, ours as well as others. Our practice is to make an effort to speak purposefully and mindfully. What the Buddha refers to as idle chatter is any form of small talk or pointless talk, any type of speech that has no real purpose, value, or depth. In the definition the Buddha gave, he was making a reference to how a monastic should practice this aspect of right speech. For a monk, for example, this means that his words should be selective and focused primarily on the Dhamma. Now, for laypersons, it's a little different. However, the principle remains the same. Lay people have the need to actively communicate at all levels in our society, at home with the family, at work with colleagues, and also with friends and acquaintances. And that's perfectly fine. The importance here is that we should still be very careful. One still needs to be aware, mindful in what one speaks. If one is not self-aware of one's own states of mind, one can easily fall under the influence of defilements, emotional states, or negative tendencies to do and to say what might not be useful or necessary, or speak for the sake of speaking, filling in the uncomfortable blank silent spaces, following one's own desires or restless impulses. So the key here is awareness. Speak with purpose, speak with care, and when in doubt, perhaps it's better to remain silent. The Buddha also gave good advice to practice right speech. He encouraged us to reflect every time before speaking and check if our words are true and factual, beneficial and useful, spoken at the appropriate time, spoken with a mind of loving kindness. If in our reflection we find that our speech is not in alignment with these premises, then we should refrain from speaking and humbly check ourselves, check our intentions and current states of mind. We can be patient with ourselves and accept the conditions of the present moment. With patience, we can also reflect on the dangers and drawbacks of wrong speech and allow ourselves to let that go and gently incline to its opposite, to speak rightly, to speak what is beneficial to us and others. Right speech purifies our relationships and creates the foundation for trust, harmony and spiritual growth in our community. Now we come to the fourth factor of the path, which is right action, in Pali, Sammā Kammanta. Right action involves ethical conduct through bodily actions. It means acting in ways that are harmless, compassionate, and conducive to the welfare of oneself and others. It is the practice of abstinence from unwholesome bodily actions. And as we saw before, it is divided into three parts. First, abstaining from taking life, from killing living beings. The Buddha said, having abandoned the destruction of life, someone abstains from the destruction of life. With the rod and weapon laid aside, conscientious and kindly, he dwells compassionately towards all living beings. The main aspect of this precept is not taking life intentionally, abstaining from deliberate killing or harming any living being, human beings, animals, and insects, cultivating respect and reverence for all forms of life. This includes avoiding actions that cause living beings to suffer, and of course, this includes oneself, because one should avoid self-harm and taking one's own life. The action to kill or harm living beings arises from the unwholesome roots of greed, hatred, and delusion, and depending on the degree and motivation, they give rise to unwholesome intentions and actions to harm or destroy life. The Buddha encourages us to develop empathy, kindness, and compassion for all living beings, to respect all forms of life with pure intentions of heart, wishing the welfare of all sentient beings. We saw this in the factor of right intention in our last episode, particularly in the intentions of goodwill and of harmlessness or non-cruelty. We can practice this precept by cultivating intentions of loving kindness and of compassion in our hearts. They will naturally prevent and abandon any unwholesome thoughts, intentions, and actions to harm or take the life of sentient beings. The second aspect of right action is abstaining from taking what is not given, stealing. The Buddha said, having abandoned the taking of what is not given, someone abstains from taking what is not given. He does not steal the wealth and property of others in the village or in the forest. This precept implies that one should refrain from stealing, robbery, fraud, or deceit. One must respect others' property and rights. This also extends to not exploiting or taking unfair advantage of others. If an object is abandoned and has no clear owner, for example, if you find something on the streets or in the forest and there is no clear owner to be discerned, taking that object does not imply stealing. But if there is anything that indicates a potential identity, one can make an effort to return it. Sometimes we might find an item that has no clear owner, but it is found in a place that the person can be identified easily or has a chance to claim it. For example, in a gym, office, or clinic. If one finds something there, it can be brought to the reception or front desk. The person can return and ask for the lost item. In any of these cases, one needs to check if there is any greed within. Greed is the primary defilement that drives a person to take possession of an object. It also motivates or convinces us to conceal information. For example, if one knows the potential owner, greed can cover that up. clouding our judgment and proceeding as if one doesn't know. One looks away at the truth and surrenders to the force of greed to want that object. There is also another defilement that drives the wrong action of taking what is not given, and that is hatred. Here, greed may not be the root that motivates such action, but rather the intention to harm the other party, wishing to deprive them of joy, happiness, or harmony. Delusion, of course, is the defilement that runs in the background of all unwholesome, unskillful actions. This happens by not seeing the harm that they create to oneself, others, or both, and not knowing the negative outcomes that they bring. The practice here is to develop honesty and sincerity. This is how we learn to respect ourselves as well as others, not only the material belongings, but also our integrity, our moral conduct, our hearts. Abstaining from taking what is not given comes from the practice of contentment with what one already has. This puts a stop to the greed to want more. In this way, one appreciates what one has and what one receives. The other quality that is wholesome and opposes that of greed is generosity. With generosity, not only can we be content with one's own belongings, but also willing to let go, relinquish, and offer to others, to give away one's own possessions or wealth for their benefit and support. The third and final aspect of right action is abstaining from engaging in sexual misconduct. The Buddha said, having abandoned sexual misconduct, someone abstains from sexual misconduct. He does not have sexual relations with women who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by their Dhamma, who have a husband, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one already engaged. Even though the Buddha was referring to monks and men in his statement, the precept is also applicable to women. The core of this practice is the abstinence from sexual misconduct and all illicit sexual relationships for both women and men. This precept promotes loyalty, fidelity, trust, and respect in marital relationships. But at a deeper level, it supports the practice of renunciation of the sensual desires. In this case, the sexual desires, which are very strong and difficult to eradicate. The monastic community observes this precept by practicing celibacy, which aims at eradicating all sexual desires. In the case of lay people who do not practice celibacy, the Buddha encourages them to refrain from all kinds of sexual relations with what are considered illicit or forbidden partners. The core intention of this precept is to refrain from any sexual behavior that causes harm, including adultery, abuse, or exploitation. In this way, one respects commitments and does not harm others. From the perspective of a man, an illicit partner will be a woman who's married to another man. If not married, a woman that is committed to another man or who's considered a partner of another man. If a woman is a widow or a divorcee, this is not considered a transgression because they are not actively and directly committed to a man. If a woman is under the protection of her mother, father, brother, or other relatives or legal guardians, this will fall under the category of an illegal partner for a man. And lastly, any women who have taken vows of celibacy, like nuns, as well as any woman forbidden by social convention or traditions, like female relatives. Now, from the perspective of a woman, an illegal partner will be considered any man other than her husband or official partner who she has committed herself to. Then, if she is divorced or is a widow, she's allowed to start a new relationship or remarry. Then we have monks or men who have taken a vow of celibacy. They will also be considered forbidden partners for a woman. And lastly, any other man who's forbidden by social convention, such as close male relatives. It is also good to mention that any type of sexual relationship that is forced or driven by violence, such as rape, is also considered an act of sexual misconduct. As we mentioned before, the practice of this precept fosters lawful relationships. It supports the trust, respect, loyalty, and faithfulness in a marriage or in a couple. It is a reminder to observe any unwholesome desire driven by greed and craving. It also strengthens the moral integrity and conduct in a person. We can see how the factors of right action create good conditions for a peaceful mind and harmonious social relationships that are both very important for our spiritual growth. The fifth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is right livelihood, Sammā Ājīva. For lay people, right livelihood means earning one's own living in a way that doesn't harm others and is consistent with Buddhist ethical principles, such as right speech and right action. Our occupation greatly influences our mental state, karma, and spiritual progress. The Buddha identified 5 types of livelihood that are considered wrong, unwholesome, and harmful to others, and that should be avoided. He said that a lay follower should not engage in trading or dealing in weapons. This is the manufacture or trade of arms and instruments of violence. Trading in living beings. This means the trade of slaves, which in the past was very common, human trafficking, raising animals for slaughter, and even prostitution. Trading in meat, which refers to butchery and the meat industry. Trading in intoxicants, this is the production or trade of alcohol, drugs, or substances that cloud the mind. And lastly, the trading in poisons, which is the manufacture or trade of toxic substances meant to harm. A lay follower should not engage in these 5 trades, as well as in any mode of earning one's living that involves trickery or scheming, persuasion, insinuation, deceit, extortion, and the strong greed for gain. These guidelines show us that any form of earnings or wealth should be acquired by legal means, truthfully, honestly, and sincerely, not by force or violence, but through ways that do not bring harm to others, through ways that bring harmony to all, that are in line with moral and ethical principles. Practicing right livelihood supports our spiritual journey and our hearts for further purification and freedom. The factors of moral conduct, Sīla, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, are an essential part of our spiritual development. They cover important aspects and areas in our daily lives, helping us reflect deeply on the qualities and characteristics of our intentions and actions. These factors or principles are not meant to oppress us, but rather to help us identify and discern any unwholesomeness and impurities that lie within us, to refrain from them and eventually overcome them, to let them go and purify our hearts from them. This process of purification is not easy or comfortable. It implies meeting with suffering, with that which is uncomfortable. It involves change, but this change is for the better. Change that brings benefits to our hearts, to the hearts of others, and to the hearts of both. Let us encourage this practice and this process of purification. Let us adopt these wholesome principles that cultivate the noble factors of moral discipline in the Noble Eightfold Path that leads to the freedom and liberation of the heart. We can finish our session for today, and I'd like to invite all to pay homage to the triple gem. Homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One, the fully self-awakened one. Homage to the Dhamma, the teachings which the Buddha so very well shared with all beings. And homage to the Sangha, the monastic community that continues to practice well and also share the Dhamma with the world. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I wish you all a good day. We'll connect again in our next session.